Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode. I'm your host, Brandon Tom, co founder of HBG Capital. I've got an awesome guest here. Before we hit the go button today, do us a quick favor, subscribe, share this with friends and family, and leave us a review. It is the currency that helps the algorithm boost us up and bring on more great listeners like John. I've got John on the show today. He's a real estate entrepreneur. He's partnered with tons of people. He's been involved over $100 million worth of apartment acquisitions. He consults active multifamily investors to help them start or grow their business. He hosts the Multifamily Insights podcast. He was formerly known as the Target Market Insights, and he is the co-creator of the Midwest Real Estate Networking Summit. John, welcome to the show.
Brandon, thank you for having me today.
Dude, it's excited to get you on our show. I know I was on your show here not too long ago. I want to talk to you about some of the big things that you've got today. You've had a lot of success in the real estate field. You've done a really good job of developing, building a strong, personal brand. But before we jump into doing the topics, what do people need to know about you if they're a first-time listener and they don't know who you are? What's your story?
Yeah, so I am a guy who started off like many of your listeners. I had a job in corporate America, working in marketing and advertising. Did that for 15 years. I enjoyed my work, but I had a problem, and that problem was I worked for two companies that ended up going through bankruptcy. The first was a very well-known, very well popularized General Motors. Back during the last economic downturn. The second was a much smaller, lesser known company at an advertising agency. And in short, when that happened, I realized I needed a plan B. And that plan B turned out to be real estate. I started off with just a two unit. That was shortly after I left GM and moved to Chicago. Slowly started to build my own personal portfolio from there. But I kept running out of my own money. As real estate investors, that tends to happen, right? You take your money, buy a property. Now you are waiting to build up more money. So that kept happening to me. And that's around the time I bought three properties, and shortly thereafter, that second company went into bankruptcy, and I realized what I was doing was working, but not fast enough, and I
Mhm.
needed to pivot, and that ultimately led me into apartment syndication, raising capital, working with other people. And fast forward, and to your point, we've invested in over $140 million worth of apartments, working primarily with everyday people just like you and I, who want to get the perks of being a real estate investor without the hassles of being a landlord themselves.
How did you go about starting your first real estate portfolio? Walk us through those steps. What was the light bulb moment, and how did you pursue that light bulb moment?
Well, it was a long time in the making, right? So, I mean, going back to college, I would read about, biographies and different stuff like that, and just how people made money. Like, I just was always curious, like, how to make money. I didn't grow up with a lot of money. And obviously, college was one thing that, you're kind of pushed to do if you want to make money and have a career. So that was the first step. But once I got to school, started meeting people and learning more about them, and I got introduced to that purple book that so many other people have gotten introduced to, Rich Dad Poor Dad. And that was really late. That was like kind of my senior year. But I remember reading that, and a light bulb kind of went off like, oh, that's how money works. So that's how you invest. Okay. But I still didn't have any money. So I'm like, okay, that's kind of like, step C. I still got to make some money to be able to invest. So that was always in the back of my head. I was always interested. And it wasn't really until I was at GM and with the company went through bankruptcy where I had time to really reflect and say, you know what? That was the thing I was supposed to be doing. So at that moment, I started to learn everything I could about real estate investing, which at that time started with reading blogs. Eventually found podcasts, eventually found meetups or RIAs, and then ultimately was able to start with really a two unit, right? About a duplex. From there, I bought a three-unit building with my wife and I, and then we bought an eight-unit building. So that was really the start, was building up my own personal portfolio. And then after that second company went through bankruptcy, that's when we started to turn our attention to raising capital and working with other investors.
Okay, so that second go around, you're like, all right, writing's on the wall. Somebody's telling me that I need to go and pursue this, working for two companies. Both of them go bankrupt and have to let everybody go. So you started really small. You started investing your own capital at first. You bought these what I would call small multifamily properties, and you realized, okay, this can actually produce some money for me. So you've had this small portfolio. Second company goes bankrupt. You don't have a job. What do you do? Because a lot of people would just go back and jump into the workforce, right? Like, what was your situation? Did you have enough reserves on the sideline where you felt comfortable, burning the rope for a year or two, or was your current portfolio making, enough to lessen the burn? I don't think it was paying for your living expenses at that time, but maybe a little bit. Like, what was your situation that gave you the confidence to keep going forward and building your portfolio?
Well, there are a couple things. That's a great question, right? So to take you to this moment of time, we have 8 units in our portfolio. Just put down 6 figures on a deposit or the down payment, basically for that 8 unit property. So I'm sorry, we had 13 units. We had just bought an 8 unit property, and about maybe 2 months later, the company I'm working for ends up going into a bankruptcy situation. So I'm scared out of my mind. I've got 2 young kids at this point. Don't really know what's going to happen from an employment standpoint. Luckily, we had lived below our means. So that first 2 unit, we lived in one of those units. So we rented out the first floor. That essentially covered the bulk of the mortgage. My wife was also working and her job was a little more stable. So we were okay at the macro level. But it was definitely my sign that, hey, what we're doing is it's kind of working, but I need to really commit to it more. So at that moment, a couple things happened. I stepped back and I looked at what I was doing and I asked myself, do I want to be updating my resume every 2 or 3 years for the rest of my life? Right. Because that's what advertising is a very fickle industry, and that's kind of what would have needed to happen, or I would have had to kind of pivot in the career. And I wanted to have more control over my life, and I did not have very much control at all at that point. So I knew I could grow what I was doing in real estate, but I didn't have enough money, and I had learned about other people's money and raising capital, going back to Rich Dad Poor Dad. I just didn't think it was for me. I didn't think I had rich friends and family members. I didn't think people would want to invest with me. Who am I to tell people, hey, come invest with me? What have I done? What have I really accomplished up to that point? I had a couple of deals that went well, but that could have been a combination of blind luck, timing, just other things, right? So I didn't feel like I was someone that could go out there and raise money. What happened was I went to a seminar, one of those like free seminars at a hotel lobby, right? And then you go to the 3 day. And I went to this 3 day and they were pitching really hard to sell this coaching program. And I thought there was some value in it, but it wasn't really what I wanted to do. It was more about flipping houses. And I really wanted to focus on multifamily. But my wife and I sat down after that second day and we asked ourselves about the resources we had available. And I realized that I was okay with investing in my education. I just didn't think that program was right. So the very next day, one of the things we did was we didn't go to that seminar the third day. We went to the library and we just sat, we got some books, we made a business plan, and we just figured out what we were going to do. And one of the main things that I was going to do was invest more time on bigger pockets. So that's what I did. I started to invest more time on bigger pockets. I started network intentionally. I was moving to Cincinnati. Well, at the time my wife was from Cincy. So I was posting and trying to connect with other Cincinnati investors. And I made a post and they tagged this guy named Joe Fairless. And at that time, he was the guy who was active on social media, but no one really knew who he was. So I connect with Joe. I say, hey, I'm coming to Cincinnati. People tagged you as somebody I should meet. Would love to grab lunch. He and I grabbed lunch, and he told me that he had this coaching program, and I thought it was perfect for what I was looking for. So I ended up hiring him and working with him. And because he was in a similar place, he took action, he got results. That made me realize this was the pathway. So hiring that coach was critical for me because the reason I didn't think raising capital was right for me, I told you I didn't think I knew people wanted to invest with me. I didn't know what I didn't know about it. I didn't want to lose anybody's money. These are all the same concerns many people have, and he had overcome those things. So by having a proven system to go through that, made life so much easier for me. Now, Joe's, in a different stratosphere today. He only takes on like one or two clients and he charges a lot more money than he did at that time. But the point is, that was so critical for me to take that step and to be comfortable investing in my education because I knew access to capital was the limiting, not just belief, but it was the limiting factor that was separating me from the life I really wanted to live. So once I was able to remove that barrier and at least open up the option to raise
Hmm.
capital, it really gave me the freedom to go out and expand this portfolio.
Okay, big time. Got the got the limiting belief removed through the Joe Fairless program, realizing, hey, look, you can do this. You can go out and raise money. What did the next steps look like? So, how did you go about? You've got a clock, right? You got two kids, a limited amount of money, not a completely new venture because you've had some experience in the past. You've got a small portfolio. The clock's ticking on this thing. What were the next steps that you took, and what did it look like?
Yeah, so a couple things. One is the good thing for me is I was still able to work during this time frame. So I got to the point where it wasn't like I was just burning money in the bank account, right? So I still had a check coming through. With that said, I didn't want to rely solely on that check because it's been clear to me that that could go away at any moment. So the next step for me was finding a deal. And in the beginning, I made a pretty big mistake. And I wanted to still do everything by myself. So I was
Mm,
looking for deals myself. I was analyzing deals myself. I was putting in offers on deals myself. And I wasted a lot of time looking for deals that I would essentially run all by myself. And after hitting my head against that wall so many times, I got approached by someone else that Joe knew. As a matter of fact, I went to a conference that Joe ran and I met some other folks at this event and we hit it off and had a great conversation. And you fast forward a few months from that event, I actually was launching my podcast and had one of those guests on. And they mentioned that they had this deal that they were working on. And I was like, well, I've been looking for deals for a long time now, and I can't even find anything. If you need help, I'd love to partner if you're open to that. And they called me about a week later and said, hey, if you're still open to partnering, we'd love to have you on. And that was really the thing that got me going because I was having a hard time finding that deal because I was looking in the Midwest and the deals in the Midwest are just structured a little differently with your future projections, the way you analyze them. They were in more, in Texas, and Texas at that time had a lot of Texas still has a lot of growth, but there are a lot of investors in Texas now. At that time, there was still more upside in that market. So I like the projections. I like the deal. They were based in Texas. So I liked a lot of what they were doing. And I ultimately ended up partnering with them. And that's critical because it forced me to partner with other people, but more importantly, it forced me to really understand that this is a team business. I was still trying to run it as kind of a solopreneur endeavor, as
mhm.
opposed to treating it like a team business where you need other people. So that was critical, and that actually allowed me to get some real traction in the business.
Wow. All right. So, second limiting belief, I have to do everything myself. That got removed. What did that look like? Did you start reaching out to people? You were now open to partnerships. Like what? Let's walk through like those first several acquisitions afterwards. What did that look like, and how did you pull those off after you realize, oh my gosh, I can't do everything myself?
Well, to reverse it real quick, so one of the steps and one of the things you're going to do if you're going to raise capital, you got to talk to investors, right? So I was having these conversations and people were liking what I was saying, right? They were interested in cash flow, they were interested in, appreciation, the tax benefits, diversification. So they were like, "Yeah, John, that sounds pretty good. I would be interested if you found a deal like that." So I was like, "Great." Well, as I was looking for these deals and not finding them, a couple of them came back to me and said, hey man, what happened to those deals you were telling me about and get me so excited for? And I'm like, yeah, I haven't been able to find them, right? So after that happens for a few times, right? A couple months go
Yeah.
by, like there's almost the inverse effect where I'm like, man, forget this like imposter syndrome thing. Like, I gotta find a deal. I've been telling these people I was gonna bring them a deal. Like, I was gonna be a real estate investor and scale what I was already doing. They're now getting frustrated because they got so excited they were sitting there doing their taxes like, oh man, I'm gonna save like 20,000. Okay, John, I'm waiting on John to bring me this deal, and they're waiting on me, right? So I've got customers and no product. So, I don't know
Great
if you
problem to
guys,
have, by the way. I
it's a
mean,
great problem to
that's
have, but it's still a problem, right? I don't know if a couple years ago, like the Xbox came out and PlayStation came out, and you couldn't find them anywhere, right? And it's like, picture you've got a store and you only sell PlayStations and Xboxes, and they're always out of stock, right? At a certain point, like customers are going to get upset, just stop coming to your store, just assume you
yeah,
never have anything. And that's
right.
kind of what was going on. So that forced me to warm up to the idea of not worrying about how I wanted to do it, which was me finding this deal and bringing it to people. And it was more so solving their problem, which was they needed deals to invest in. So that flipped the script on me now vetting potential partners. And it wasn't like a decision I made to say, okay, hey, I'm going to find someone else who's I'm going to partner with. It really was organic, where just through conversations, I was just sharing, hey, I've got investors now. They're looking to invest. I'm having a hard time with the deal. And they're like, oh, well, guess what? We got this deal that's getting ready to come up. Maybe we can partner together. I'm like, well, you know what? I've known you for a while now. You've followed through on everything that you've said over the time period I've known you. You've got a good track record on the deals that you've done. I like the market. I like the way you approach the business. We've got a similar, we've got the same mentor, similar background. So because I felt comfortable with all those things, I was open to the partnership there. And I think that's really important. Oftentimes people want to fast forward the due diligence process or the vetting process and just partner because they're excited. If you're going to partner with other operators, it's really important to make sure you're partnering with the right operators. And that takes time. That takes some patience. You really need to get to know them, who they are,
Mhm.
how they operate, how they think about the business, how do they underwrite? Are they truly conservative, or do they just say they're conservative? I've never met anyone who said we're aggressive in our underwriting. I don't think I'll ever meet someone who says that, right? Everyone's conservative. So you need to figure out what that actually means. Where are they being conservative? How do you cross reference that conservatism, right? So that's the thing that I'm looking for. And in that relationship, it matched up very nicely and it worked. And that allowed us to get a deal or two going. And then we actually found some deals ourselves. So then we did those deals that we led and operated. So it started to become this thing where we now had partners that we believed in, and we were comfortable bringing our friends, our family, our network to, but also deals that we were kind of running where we would obviously bring those same investors to those deals as well.
Okay. What did that look like? So you're talking to a lot of people, getting them all excited, realize, hey, I got to get some partnerships. How did you go about finding these operators, these partners that could bring the deals to you?
Well, that was the beauty of it, right? I wasn't out there actively looking for them. It really just came through natural relationships and conversations.
Okay.
One of the things that's great, we're on this podcast right now. And when you have a podcast, you have a chance to talk to people and ask them very intricate questions about their philosophies and their business plan and how they grow, and really get
Yeah.
to know who they are and almost interview them in a way where you can get into their psyche, but it's not like an interview. It's not like, hey, I'm going to interview you to be an operator for one of my deals, right? So I wasn't
Right.
really thinking about it from that perspective. But as we were just chatting and getting to know each other more on the podcast, I realized I really liked the way this person thought about the business, approached the business, and I would be comfortable both investing myself as well as bringing other investors to them. So that became an avenue, but we really have only partnered with a handful of people. And it truly comes down to there being kind of an organic, natural connection between us and that individual, the way they think, and someone that we want to partner with. I think that's really, really important. Is if you go into it with the mindset of, I want to partner with this person, you may already kind of have a glossy vision and kind of rose colored glasses as you're talking to them. And maybe you're missing some of those things that should be concerning, or at least things that might be yellow flags that you want to follow up on.
Makes a lot of sense. I love what you did there. It's a way of interviewing people without actually interviewing them, right? You get to the heart because the pressure on what you're really looking for, just something you're looking for in general is off, right? You're just having a natural conversation, getting to know them. I love that. That is a great thing. And I'm going to steal that. Be like, who do I need to do that with? I can just invite them on our podcast and just as a guest, chill and get to know them. That's a really good strategy. I like what you did there. So you are known for building a really good personal brand. I want to talk about this because I think in the future, everybody's going to have some kind of personal brand out there. I mean, look at people who even aren't in business, W-2 employees. One of the first things that employer is going to do is look at your social media. What kind of content are you putting out there? Is it you drinking at parties, or is it you with family? Are you well dressed? How do you present yourself? What are you privy to being out there that is about yourself? And so, like it or not, every single person in the future is going to have some kind of social brand, some kind of online social identity. How have you gone about building an online brand that really resonates and stands out?
Well, Brandon, I hate to break this to you, but that future you described is here.
Hmm.
That's where we're at today. I mean, to your point, any employer, they're going to Google you. They're going to search and see how you show up on social media. That's where we're at. The folks who are getting hired are the ones who can stand out, who can leverage their brand to get in front of the right individuals. That's how you stand out in today's world. So we are at that point where social media, and not just social media, but a personal brand is absolutely critical. How do you develop a personal brand? Well, the first thing is understanding what we're talking about. I think sometimes when people hear personal brand, they think of marketing tactics like advertising or social media post or podcasting or being a speaker. That's not what a personal brand is. We all have a personal brand. Okay. A personal brand is simply how people think of you when you're not in the room to speak for yourself. So if I call someone else and they say, "Hey, John, thinking about doing something with Brandon Cobb. What are your thoughts on Brandon?" Whatever I say is a reflection of your personal brand, right? And that's just what it is. So, what we can do is we can help to shape our personal brand. And that's what we're about to get into is how do you shape the personal brand to highlight the things that you want people to know. We all have good things. We may have things that, we may not want a lot of people to know about, but we want to be our authentic self. And a personal brand is really a megaphone for who you are at your core. So social media is that, right? If you have family, maybe you want to post about your family. Maybe you want to post about real estate deals as if you're a real estate investor and want to raise capital for these deals. Maybe you want to post about the markets and make sure that people know that you understand what's happening in your markets. But these are the things that you can do to craft it. It's kind of like Nike, right? Nike's a huge company. They bring on, the top athletes in the world because they want to be known as a top performance brand, right? That's why they go get LeBron James and Serena Williams and whoever else they may go get. That doesn't change maybe some of their business practices that have been looked down upon in the past years, right? Whether it's how they, build their products and things like that. It doesn't change all of that, but these are the things that kind of shape what a brand really is about. So for us as individuals, the first thing is understand what you want people to know about you. If you are a doctor, if you're a dentist, if you're an engineer, if you're a lawyer, whatever you do professionally, you want to make sure people know that. LinkedIn is obviously a great platform from an occupation standpoint of sharing what it is you do, but your social media is too. Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Like you can let people know what it is that you do. What's really important here, though, is not just the job title, but let them know what makes you different. What's your viewpoint? What makes you unique? What makes you good? Are you compassionate? Are you caring? Are you funny and humorous? Like, have some of these things about your personality come out. Again, it's a megaphone for who you are at your core. So it's really important to make sure you do that. Highlight the things that you do well. And it doesn't mean that you have to be on every single platform. Figure
Yeah.
out which platforms are best for you. Again, if you love the camera and you love, talking, maybe that's great. If not, maybe you're a writer. Then you can write posts on social media. You can write for, again, Medium or some of these other websites. But there are ways to get out there and get in front of people. But understand the goal for building a personal brand is twofold. It's to let people know who you are. But the other
Mhm.
thing is what we call attraction marketing. And that's to bring business to you, right? Because ultimately, you're not going to know the people who are looking for the thing that you offer. Going back to Nike as an example, you're not just going to knock on people's door and try to sell them a pair of shoes. However, if you've got a store, you need people to come into that store. So you're trying to drive traffic. You're trying to make people want to come into that store looking for a specific item. And if they know where to get it, it's much easier for them. It's the same thing for us, right? If you're a dentist, You want to let people know, hey, I'm here. Here's what I'm known for. Here's my current credentials. Here are the referrals. Here are the people who've had a great experience working with me. So these are the kind of things that help to shape up a personal brand. And it's really important that all of us employ some of these things so that people know when to reach out to us and how we can help them.
Wow, 100%. Do you have any tips on specific things that people should be doing daily, weekly, or monthly to help build that personal brand? You talked about a lot of stuff there. I want to try to like boil down some easy steps that people can take to do this.
Yeah, I know a lot of your listeners are in real estate, so let's just kind of keep it focused on real estate right now. And I'm just going to say, like a real estate agent. If you are a real estate agent, what a lot of real estate agents do is they will post on Facebook when they've sold a house, right? Hey, just sold 123 Main Street.
Yeah.
Okay, well that's good, but that's not really helpful. What would be better is to highlight how you help that client and put yourself in the shoes of the person you want to attract. So in this case, let's say I'm a seller's agent. Okay. I want to list that, hey, we just sold 123 Main Street in 4 weeks, 5% above asking price. If you have a home that you're thinking of listing, I'm happy to talk to you about, what you can do to get it ready for sale. Right. Now I've given context of not just that I sold this, but how I outperformed what the seller's expectations were, both from a time standpoint as well as a cost standpoint. And now I'm offering a service of some sort to help that individual, right? On top of that, that's just the just sold thing. On top of that, market information. What's going on in your market? My sister is one of the agents, so she and I chat about this kind of stuff all the time.
Yeah.
And one of the things that I said to her was, I moved from Chicago to Cincinnati, and I'm like, it would have been really nice and helpful to have a sense of just like the community I was moving into, because I couldn't tell you the difference between Sycamore and Mason and all these little sub markets, right? I could look at the reports and I could see like, the niche score ratings and things like that, but that doesn't really mean anything to me. So to have someone do like a breakdown of, hey, this area is known for blah 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 blah, there's just some great restaurants, or hey, if you like, if you're looking for more of this, check out this area. That would have been extremely helpful. On top of that, one thing my sister does an amazing job of, she gives people like pretty much every service they can need when they move in. So she's got, a landscaping guy. She's got
Mm,
a chimney cleaning guy, someone to buy my wood for my chimney. Like I had all the services I could have needed at my house for the first like 2 or 3 months, because it's stuff you just don't think about, right? It's like, oh, like, is there a home cleaning service or a maid service, or, where's this or where's that? And she's like, oh, check out this guy, use this guy. Here's my electrician. So I'm like, awesome, because I'm moving from another state. So to have these resources and have her providing these things was very, very beneficial, right? And I'm sure it helped her with, those vendors as well. So just thinking through who you're talking to and what do they need. That is the biggest thing that you can do to drive results, and creating content that serves that audience, because
mhm.
now you're going to position yourself as an expert, as an authority figure, and someone who is going to help solve those problems. So the next time someone's looking for that, you're going to come to mind. If I get, if I'm talking to a buddy and he says, hey, man, thinking about, or my mom's looking to move to Cincinnati, or my sister's moving to Cincinnati, where do you think she live? Oh, you know what? Such and such just put together this great video on neighborhoods. I'm going to send it to you. Right. I'm not
Mm.
necessarily saying hire her as your real estate agent, but here's a piece of content that I do think would be very beneficial to you. And naturally, what's going to happen next? There's going to be a call for action for her to at least reach out and consider that person. So make sure you're
Yeah.
actually helping these individuals. And that's going to be really key for you to build a personal brand.
Yeah, I love what you said there. Who's your target avatar? What are their needs? What are the pain points? What are they wants? What are their limiting beliefs? And structuring and building content around that, because the person who they connect with is the person that they're going to end up doing business with, right? Some of the things that we do that we've had a lot of great feedback and success is we've taken a lot of the jargon out of what we do, right? I go in and I read a lot of people's LinkedIn profiles. And what do I see in the about section? Like downside mitigated returns. We help people achieve, financial freedom. Nobody connects with that crap. Straight up, they don't. they connect with your story. They connect with you. And I can't tell you, it was funny. All I did was switch out the About Us section of my LinkedIn, and people were reaching out, commenting about that. Like, oh my God, like that's crazy that, you did that. I love your story. And I'm like, really? Like, because the guy who told me to do this, my LinkedIn consultant, he told me to do it. I'm like, dude, the changing the About section is not going to do anything. And dude, I was wrong. I cannot believe such a simple thing made such a big difference. And so, what's really interesting is you ask yourself how to connect with your audience, right? So if that's the goal, to build like a personal brand. And I love what you said. What do people say about you when you're not in the room? That is your personal brand, right? And people are going to do business with people they connect. So how do people connect with you? It's through storytelling, right? People connect with that story, and getting really good at telling a story in a way where, if you can frame yourself as like the hero's journey, very popular Hollywood framework that they use in movies and scripts to make the buyer or the viewers really buy into the whole character. Man, it is complete game changer. So we put that story out there, right? My story, and that has been a huge way of people to connect. We'll also do videos every single day, again, around content that is designed to try to deliver value to the target avatar. And when people see that video of you, when there's an actual face and you talking on it, I mean, that does something. It allows them to get to know you, because most people, when they're considering purchasing something, they usually don't just purchase right off the get-go, right? They kind of want to fill you out. They want to get to know you a little bit, especially when it comes to raising money. That's just one thing. That's a very long sales cycle. People have to get very comfortable with you to give you 50, 100, $1 million. And being able to see that everyday content that you're putting out there and get to know you, I mean, that's huge, right? And I like to throw in little things that are unique to me. Like, I'm a steak guy, and so I tell people, like, I look at all the stuff that I just imported from Japan and Australia, like my Wagyu meat, and I'll talk about beef marbleization scores and the dry aging process. And, people reach out to me and ask me questions about my steak. And it's so flippin' funny, because that's something that I would have never thought that hit. I shared my journey of when I got hair transplants. I had more people reach out to me asking my advice about hair transplants than I did about investing money. And it opened up those conversations for me to connect with these people. And they were actually like, hey, by the way, we are thinking about doing this. Let me ask you questions about this particular thing that I'm thinking about investing in. And so that connection was made there. Um, so it's really, really interesting. I love the
I
journey here.
love,
I love the whole personal brand thing. Go ahead.
and you mentioned the hair transplants, right? And that's one that could obviously create some jokes and things like that, but it's also a very vulnerable thing. And that's the thing about it too, is when we talk about that megaphone, if you can add authenticity and vulnerability in that space, the connections you'll make, because so many people, they want to project this perfect image of themselves, right?
Yeah.
And that's what we want people to know. And I'm sure you had to, weigh whether or not you want to share certain things, but that's the beauty of it. When you can cross over and be your authentic self and be transparent and be a little bit vulnerable, you're going to build a connection with an audience that is very powerful, because they see you in your natural state. And when they can see you that way, there's a two-way comfort where they know you're going to be transparent with them, and I think that's very helpful when they're trying to get to know who you are as an individual and who you are as a company.
Yep. 100%. I've really enjoyed this conversation. John, if people want to learn more about you, learn more about investing with you, where can they go?
Yeah, so one of the things we found is that most people get excited about a conversation like this and then have no idea what to actually look for when a deal is presented. So we put together a sample deal package so that you can review that, try to get some questions and wrap your head around it. You mentioned the jargon, completely agree. Lots of jargon that just gets thrown around these things. So take
Yeah.
a look at our sample deal package. That's available at casmoncapital.com/sample deal. That will also get you into our email list, but it'll also get you a follow-up email with 7 things that you need to be looking for anytime you're evaluating a deal. So get that at casmoncapital.com/sample deal.
I love it, man. We'll make sure that gets posted in the show notes. Thanks for coming on the show today.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me today.
We'll see you next time, guys. Thanks for listening.